Yo, it's ODB, our lifestyle podcast, also known as OLP. And I want to hit you guys with a cool video, ODB's Corner here, and talk about one of my favorite albums, if not my favorite of all time, The Chronic. And the little bit of a connection that I had with it recently. You guys aren't going to believe this journey. Stick with me and let's talk about who shot the album cover and where. So if you've listened to OLP, you know that I'm a huge fan of The Chronic. Really, a lot of death row artists, albums. If you think about The Chronic and then Doggy Style coming just under a year later, what a run that started with a lot of different compilations, soundtracks, and just albums in general, including Tupac's All Eyes on Me and Dog Pound's Dog Food, of course. But one thing as a fan of anything, whether it's a movie or an album or an artist or a label, we tend to delve into things as much as we can, right? And learn everything about it, all the different aspects. One thing that I recently wanted to go down in terms of a kind of a trail to learn more was a little bit more about the photographer who shot The Chronic. Now, if we look at this original pressing of the album, we do know that Daniel Jordan shot these photos, and rightfully so. If you think about the credit that's given on these albums, it's really key for who gets paid or who gets the credit, if you will, for said work. And one thing that I've noticed as a fan of just music in general is over the course of time, when albums are reproduced, not only may they could potentially sound a little bit different, but also the packaging is going to look a little bit different. And if you look at a current version of The Chronic, you'll find those in Target. You'll see that the packaging does appear differently, and primarily on the back is where you're going to see all of those credits are kind of removed, and that's just the way it goes in the industry. So one thing that I've always known is Daniel Jordan shot the photos based upon the cassette, the CD, and the original pressing of the album. So we can look in there, we can look in those notes, and we can see who gets the credit for it. Now, over the past couple years, I continuously researched different fun facts about the album, and each year I learned more about it. And around December, I typically will do an OLP episode dedicated to The Chronic. Last year, I think I did skip out. I didn't have a lot of new stuff to share. This year, of course, I'll be doing more, including this video here with ODB's Corner. Now, if we jump into the meat and potatoes of this story, something I want to do is give thanks to Vlog. I think it's Vlog by Mike. I'll link a description, or I'll link to that in the description. He was instrumental in finding out this information for me. I took a trip to California just this past weekend, and over the past year or so, I knew a couple of the things I wanted to do: go to the Warren G 21st and Lewis, where Regulate the G-Funk Era was shot by Mike Miller Photo. But also I wanted to hopefully find out where this album cover was shot. Now, many of us and some of you watching might think, hey, well, you basically have The Chronic, you have that, that photo on the front, what's the big deal? From a pop culture perspective and some of the things I do and my friends like Sean at All About Los Angeles, we typically will scout out the original location of where a photo was taken from a historical perspective or just maybe from a fan standpoint. I got a chance to recently meet Kevin Donen at As the Record Turns LA, and when I was kind of explaining to him that I had visited just earlier in that day the epic location, he said the same thing that some of you are thinking. Well, hey, wasn't the front cover just the photo of Dre with the white paying homage to Zigzag, and then the back of the album was white, and it of course had each of the tracks listed? And I said, yeah, Kevin, you're correct, but if you look at what I refer to as the lowrider photo, that photo is really kind of the key photo to me for the artwork. Okay, if you had the LP or record, if you will, you know that there's a sleeve that you pull out, and those two records would come out, and then you would have that that artwork there, right? I have that hanging in my man cave here, as well as some other things related to Dr. Dre. Some you can see in the frame here. Now, Vlog by Mike basically had given me a little bit of hope in finding out where this album was shot, including the studio photos here that you'll see, and what I refer to in this video as the lowrider photo. Now, he did a video with Daniel Jordan, and I was like, wow, in amazement that Daniel doesn't really seem to be like, you know, a lot of these older kind of photographers and some of these different folks. They're not big on social media, right? They came up in a different era, and tip of the cap, you know, I totally understand that. When Vlog by Mike did the video with Daniel, Daniel explained some of the key things about, you know, doing the studio session, and prior to Dre leaving, kind of saying, hey, I want to shoot a couple photos, you know, on the exterior here of the studio. And, you know, Dre was, of course, you know, good to go with that. Now, since talking with Daniel a little bit, I do believe, you know, when the concepts are come up with for the artwork, whether it be, you know, through Interscope or through meeting with the artist and things like that, they kind of have a game plan, if you will. And my understanding was, of course, they needed to have the headshots, which were going to be used primarily for press release photos, as well as the album cover itself. And they were going to need some additional photos potentially for promotional items, ads, and or in this case, the inner sleeve, I'll refer to it as. It also does appear on the UK version of the Chronic LP single, so that's on the back as well. And it showed up in a couple of places, but primarily in the CD J card and the cassette. So the J card is typically what I believe everyone refers to as these little cards here. So we're talking about this guy right here, the photo. So with Daniel providing Mike the intel, that allowed for me to get the exact location. Daniel recalled exactly where he shot the photos. So I started scouting out, and we'll look here in a few minutes on Google Maps. I started scouting through Google Maps, as many of these kind of pop culture explorers do, and that helps us nail down exactly where we want to get to in terms of the photos, and to see if the landscape is even still the same. Now, Daniel also had relayed to Mike that it was going to maybe possibly be hard to line anything up because of construction that has happened, rightfully so, over the past 30 years. So I didn't want that to stop me. Once I got the address, I was super stoked, and that led me down where we're going next in jumping into Google Maps. So if we take a look at Google Maps, anytime there's a studio photo, you know, that may not pique the interest of someone that is into pop culture, kind of like I am, because you kind of go, well, you know, we know where the photo was taken, you know, cool, but we really can't replicate that. And if you really look at the album cover for Dre, the Chronic, there's not much to really replicate. Very similar to if I look at Ice-T, Rhyme Pays, you know, that awesome album cover. In the back, you had a gate and you had a couple of palm trees. Although we tried to track down that location, our understanding, also talking with my friend at All About Los Angeles, Sean, he's kind of been able to confirm over the course of time that all of that's been mowed down, if you will, and it's gone, right? So sometimes recreating an album cover isn't going to be as fun if it's just a photo like this, something that was taken in a studio, or something without a background that you can really nail down, right? A specific spot. So what I did was I used this information to hone in on this building, and I said, okay, well, cool. That's a fun fact that more than likely only a couple people knew about at the time, including Daniel. And Daniel may have probably been the only person that could recall that. So again, I thank him and his awesome wife. I spoke to them just over 30 minutes about a week ago, and I was super stoked. This was after I had went to that location the day prior. So, you know, the intel that he had provided with the address, you can see here, if we look at Google Maps, this is the building. So I did spend time thinking originally that this little alleyway was where the photos were shot, because I was looking at some of the power lines in the back. If we look at the iconic lowrider photo, as I'll refer to it as, there's not a lot of giveaways. There's a building on the right. There's, of course, the Impala. There's what appears to be one or two telephone slash power poles. And then in the background, there is a kind of a large building. It looks like a commercial building with what appears to be kind of like a ventilation fan, right? Used either for air conditioning or in this case, I think typically to kind of move out some of the hot air. So with it being a low light photo, not a lot to go on. I spent a few hours literally going down the different roads with Google Maps until I got to the point that I started thinking maybe the building on the right of the iconic photo had been demoed, and with a parking lot there and a newer structure, I thought to myself, that could be the answer. And spending a lot of time here, what I was able to do is nail down that if I go to the end of the road, I found that with Google Maps, we can of course travel back in time, and it let me go back to, I believe it was 2007. And by doing so, just moving around a little bit with the cursor, I was able to immediately realize that I had figured this out. And if we look at this little area that you see, you'll see the building, everything aligns with the Daniel Jordan photo, including what I refer to as the ventilation fan on top of the roof. There is an AC, a couple of AC things that you'll see in Google here as well. So the air conditions typically in a commercial building are going to be on top like this. But also in the back, you see the power lines, right? So if you think back and we turn around and we kind of go back to the spot where Dr. Dre was standing and the car was parked and kind of laid out, if you will, on the hydraulics, you could imagine Daniel sitting there clicking off the photos and kind of maybe with a little bit lower stance, whether he was laying on the ground or crouched down, he's kind of got that front three-quarter shot facing up. You see Dre, you see the car, and then boom, you see in the background the commercial building, you see the ventilation fan there, and then you see the power line. So obviously, even with things changing the past 30 years, and let's take off about 10 or 12 years of that, because if you think about like 2007, we don't really know when that other building was built. I mean, you kind of get to the point and you go about 20-ish years, things had kind of remained the same. But thanks to Google, I was able to perfectly line this up. Now, I started this video a couple of weeks ago, and I was going to have it pretty much wrapped up and then just insert some of the on-site video that I'm getting ready to show. However, I thought to myself, I want to be 100% absolute certain. And Daniel, again, after the day after that I went to the location, I did speak with him on the phone. Thank you, Daniel, for your time. Daniel was able to confirm I nailed it. Now, he did state, you know, the perspective, you know, taking about 10 steps back to the one photo that I sent him. I took a bunch there, but I shot him one from my iPhone. And he said, yeah, if I would have taken about 10 steps back, that would have been the exact spot that he was standing. I took video on site. I took other photos as well. And it was pretty cool to think that this little back road, if you will, was where the iconic photo took place. And when you think back to, you know, April of '92, when Deep Cover comes out on the, you know, the 187 track on the Deep Cover soundtrack, and then you think later in the year, really this album kicked it all off for Death Row Records. And with pop culture and hip hop and things like that, such at the forefront today, it's great to be a little bit part of the history in figuring this out. And again, I couldn't have done it without Vlog with Mike and Daniel Jordan's help. So tip of the cap to them. Now, one quick story that I'll share, and I'm going to try to link to this video at the very end for anybody that didn't see it. I did make a recent short video, less than 10 minutes, and I talked about some confusion from another photographer. And I do believe the photographer, as I mentioned in that video, he was simply mistaken. He did shoot the photos for the 187 maxi single and single, and there were a couple of different photo sessions that happened. So that gentleman, you know, again, 30 years passes, and I can understand there could be confusion, but for some reason he was under the impression that his photos were used for The Chronic, this album right here, and you can see the artwork kind of to my right. That we were able to debunk that, and I thank Daniel, because what I was able to do is communicate back through Mike, and then eventually talk to Daniel for a few minutes. And Daniel, you can imagine as a photographer, one of the key things to them is, you know, getting the credit, right? And Daniel's name, as I showed earlier, is listed as the photographer. So Daniel, rightfully so, my understanding, reached out to Michael, which was Michael Benabeb, I believe is how you say his name. And when I talked with Daniel recently, who took the photos, the next day he had texted me and said that that blog post had been taken down. So again, no disrespect to the other photographer. Certainly, again, I wasn't the person that took the photos, but to share a small part in helping get the story correct really is the utmost importance to me. And for Daniel to be able, hopefully, to maybe come out here a little bit on social media and share some of those awesome details. I'd love to have him on our OLP podcast in the future. I've spoke with Mike, Mike, who's Vlog by Mike. He's going to come on and talk about the connection that him and I had to Daniel, and I think it's pretty cool. So again, the key thing is, you know, you got to get the facts straight, and that's what we do here at OLP. So thanks to everybody who continues to support us. So in just a second, we're going to go to some on-site video. So I'll kind of show you as I was approaching the site. I felt like I had already been there simply because I had spent so much time on Google Maps and kind of the street views, if you will, trying to determine and figure this stuff out. Lastly, I would just say that if you think about the legacy of Death Row and the popularity of where things are at, and with Snoop and potentially other folks now owning Death Row Records, my understanding is Snoop owns it. And, you know, to me, it's pretty cool, the legacy. And I do believe that this will open it up for other fans to go there and take photos. I would ask that you give credit, maybe mention my Instagram at BD94S10, as well as Daniel Jordan and Vlog by Mike. I mean, these are the three of us, I think, are going to out this location, and a lot of the folks that are into pop culture, like my friend Sean at All About Los Angeles, will certainly flock to this location to be able to grab a glimpse and stand where Dr. Dre stood with the lowrider laid out on those hydros. I would say late October, early November. I'd like to determine the exact date. I have seen notes from Interscope and the label on different things, and the album cover was laid out without the Daniel Jordan photo. So I do know that those notes were labeled October 19th, 92. So I do suspect between the 20th of October and the first week in November are when the photos were taken. We do know that the G-Thing video was filmed around that first week in November, including, I think, November 7th is some of the information that I've seen. So a lot of good intel out there. You just have to find it. And again, I can't thank these guys enough for contributing to this story. Of course, Daniel Jordan shooting this iconic, epic album cover, even though it was a studio photo there, and the insert kind of photo inside the J card and on the album, simply amazing. So let's jump in right now. You've heard enough from me, ODB, from our Lifestyle Podcast, also known as OLP. Let's jump right in. Yo, so I'm continuing this video. Wanted to let you guys know I'm about 19 miles out from the location, which I've been talking about. Again, thanks to the Vlog by Mike. Really appreciate him, you know, corresponding back and forth with me. He's friends with Daniel, as I mentioned, and it's kind of awesome, you know, growing up on G-Funk, hip-hop in general, West Coast. You know, we talked about it a little bit on OLP. Never would have got a chance to think that I could stand right where the lowrider photo was taken. Now, of course, I've kind of established that the interior, you know, studio photo that was used for the press photo that I have, as well as the cassette, the CD, the long box packaging, which of course those stopped like, you know, third quarter 93, and then of course the vinyl, and then inside of the vinyl was the sleeve, was the lowrider photo, and then inside the J card, as they call them, for the cassettes, and then of course inside the CD as well. That, you know, that's where the famous photos that Daniel took are used. And I did pull out, I didn't bring it, but I did pull out the, I think it was late 90s, like 98. It was the NWA Legacy double disc that came out. and it basically was like the music, like everybody that was kind of cut from that cloth. You know, everyone from like, you know, of course, Dre, Mac 10, Westside Connection, you know, a little bit of music from everyone. But on the cover is a collage of album covers. And Discogs, Daniel is credited with that one because there's a small photo or you know, there's the album cover of the Chronic. So as far as I can see, he only shot a couple. The Dre one was the big one as far as Discogs, but I'll be curious if Daniel, if Vlog by Mike, if he can get me in contact with Daniel and I can talk with him and maybe find out like, hey, you know, did he do, you know, other type of photography that really wasn't just in the limelight, maybe like an album cover. So, but rest assured, we're getting close. We're passing Long Beach Boulevard now. Let's do this. All right, so I'm getting close. You can see here. Feels like I spent time around this area because I was on Google Maps so much trying to figure it out. It's about a 30-minute drive from where I was just at, from the VIP record store where Snoop filmed, or Fab Five Freddy directed I think him and Dre kind of directed the What's My Name video. Of course, VIP record. There's a photo of Craig Mack, I think Notorious B.I.G. in front of it I downloaded. But yeah, we're almost here. And you can see some of these things here. That's what I originally thought when I thought the photo was taken this way. But luckily, due to Google, I was able to figure out that it was actually taken facing that way. Let's do it. You can see here where I thought the photo was taken this way originally, and you know, again, I spent some time on Google Maps because of all of those things right there. Now this yellow and white, that is the new structure that was taken down, or that was constructed, that really made this whole little thing tough. That little alley is where I originally thought maybe the photo was taken. What we're doing now is we're turning on the road, and this is the address where the studio, you know, per Daniel, where the photo was taken. I'm gonna try to park over here and see what I can do. Ironically enough, there's people over here shooting photos, doing some sort of thing. So this would have been the studio, the 900. And as I mentioned in the video, basically right here is where the other building would have been. Back there is where I showed you, that's the new structure. And that pole, so I couldn't really tell in Google, but that pole is wood. And then the other one is the galvanized. The second one's probably been changed. But the lowrider would have been parked about, like I said for the video, about right here. About, I don't know, 15, you know, it would have been parked right about here. So, of course, I brought my CD, and here it's kind of crazy to think that, like, you can see literally that pole right there, and then the slimmer pole. And then over there, I can't really see through that little opening there, but I showed you guys on Google how that all stuff lines up. And it was a ventilation fan on top was the little giveaway, and that was the previous structure that was right there. So yeah, crazy to think that they would have shot those photos right there in that studio. How ironic, they're doing a photo shoot outside here. It must be some sort of studio. And then, like I said, I did spend a good bit of time, and I really thought that that was the spot. But after going down all these different roads on Google Maps, and then going in the time warp, you know, go back to 07 before that structure was there, that's what tells us it was right there. Yo, so check this out. 30 years ago, I pretty much figured it out 30 years ago, between mid-October and the very beginning of November, Dr. Dre parked his lowrider right here. Daniel Jordan shot the photos. I've seen handwritten notes from Interscope and people that work there. I know for a fact on 10/19 the photos had not been submitted yet based upon some of those handwritten notes I've seen. So I do suspect between like the 20th and maybe the very beginning of November, we know when the G-Thang video was shot, at least one of the particular days. I'll talk more about that. But we know based upon the launch date of 12/15, I suspect between October 20th and mid-November, those photos had to be submitted. So we know that photo shoot went down right here. And again, just to reiterate, you got this pole here that comes down. The car would have been parked right there. You've got the galvanized pole. That one would have been swapped out over the years. I'm sure cars could hit it, whatever. The building that I showed you would have been back there. And then behind it, you would have seen, well, on top of the building, you would have saw the AC ventilation fan. And then behind it, you would have saw those power lines. So depending on the lens, I'm not a professional photographer, but Daniel would have been about right here-ish. And he would have taken that low light kind of photo in the evening. He talked about in the Vlog with Mike video. And you would have had that photo, boom, right there. Pretty crazy. It happened right here and nobody even knows. And then again, here is the address that Daniel had given, and this is the 900. You can kind of see over there. That is where the photos for the album would have been taken on the inside in the press. So although I showed in another video where someone else believes they shot the cover photos or the artwork, they didn't. It was actually this, Daniel Jordan took that photo and a few others, because we got to remember when they're doing press stuff, they need to have the press release photos and things. I own one of the originals of it. This is the original compact disc, of course, but that artwork, that photo there that he took inside this studio, again, it appeared on the cassette, the CD, the vinyl, the long box art. If you guys remember back in the day, they had long box, the packaging. And then on top of that, you also had and on top of that, you have this photo here, which again, we established was taken right there. Crazy. So I just pulled out of there. I'm going to the next stop, which is the NWA and Posse, which I kind of call a compilation. Their first, not really an album, again, more of a compilation. This is the, I was just on that road over there. I'll show you. This new building, again, is what, when I had inquired about this, you know, to the right is where the photo would have been facing. And this is, there's the road I was just on. And as Daniel had confirmed, a lot of this stuff has changed the landscape. But again, thanks to Google Maps, we did it. On to the next stop, y'all. Thanks for the support. Keep watching. OLP, and don't forget to subscribe. Yo, it's ODB. I think this is a wrap for the video. If you've watched all the way through, I can't thank you enough. Please consider subscribing. Leave a comment. Much love to Vlog with Mike and Daniel Jordan. Again, two guys, I could not have done this video or linked up this location without them. Shout out to my friend Sean at All About Los Angeles. Check out his website, in his Instagram as well. He's got a lot of these locations already scouted. So if this hobby piques your interest whatsoever, he's got a great starting point there on his website. Daniel, I think all the years this album has stood the test of time, 30 years later almost. Being that we're coming up on the 30th, I hope that Death Row will pay homage in some way, form, or fashion to this album. Maybe Daniel can link back up with Dre one day and recreate this photo, or the photos, if you will, for the album. Maybe there'll be a box set. I'd love to see something come out with some of the B-sides and unreleased tracks, but only time will tell. We'll have to see if Death Row is really going to do that. It's unfortunate that a lot of us can't stream the albums, but lucky for me, I own them on cassette, CD, as well as vinyl in some cases. But we have seen the Tupac, you know, family. They have re-released some of their Death Row albums, and that's, of course, because they own the rights to those. But much love to everyone out there that loves The Chronic as much as I do. And to all the hip-hop fans worldwide, can't thank you guys enough for the support for checking this out. Make sure you give credit, Daniel Jordan, Vlog with Mike, as well as me, ODB, at BD94S10 if you can. If not, stay on the rise. We at you.